the CDFM study group. Today, we're going to continue review of CDFM Module 3 out of the 2024, which is the newest study guide at this particular time of the recording. We're going to be going over competency number 3, which deals with auditing. If you have the older study guide, this will be competency number 4, because I think the older one was fiscal law, finance, accounting, and auditing. Well, the new book starts off with finance, accounting, and auditing, and then fiscal law is still being tested on the exam. At any time, if you have questions and you're here on the live session, feel free to go ahead and ask your questions. At that time, please be reminded you're being recorded. So if you don't want something being recorded, please don't say it at that time, because I download this same video and upload it to our YouTube platform. All right, if you have not already subscribed to our YouTube page, please go ahead and do so you'll get notified. Click that notification button at the top of your YouTube, and it'll let you know every time I upload a new video. It will also, on the new video, since I now have the notes posted, it'll also provide a link. Usually by that Friday of that week, I will have the notes updated for the newer books. And if you want to purchase those for a minimal cost, you can do so when I upload the video and the notes. So the video is usually on Wednesdays, and then the notes will be posted by end of day Friday to give me enough time to record. Any question from anyone in the live session? All right, so let's go right into it. All right, and so module 3, competency 3, is auditing, federal auditing. And so the question becomes, why do we need audits? And think about it, still in the realm of the CDFM, still in the realm of the 3 branches of government, how things function, who controls the money, well, supposed to control the money, and how things operate, are supposed to operate. What is the purpose of an audit? Well, audits, when it comes to appropriation, it's typically done by the Government Accountability Office. That's the GAO. So the GAO works for Congress. Congress puts all this legal language and says the do's and the don'ts of the appropriations, what we can and cannot do. But remember, Congress does not have the time to follow up and make sure we are following those rules. So occasionally they will request the GAO to do audit. Who does the GAO audit?
The executive branch. Correct?
The executive branch. Ding, 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 ding. Because a lot of people don't grasp it. Remember, the budget comes from the president, goes to the Congress, Congress approves it, then it goes back to the president for the president to sign for it to become law. So the president is the executive branch. And so that means all of us, when we're spending the budget, we are spending the executive branch budget. And so when GAO is asked by Congress to inquire on certain appropriations and what we're doing with them, then that is the reason. So if you see GAO is evaluating the executive branch, that statement is true. Every agency should also have their own, like DOD Inspector General. They have their own auditing capabilities. But the most authoritative, because they work independent of the executive branch, that is the GAO. So what the GAO does for auditing is the GAO provides us with government auditing rules, and they're called the Generally Accepted Government Auditing Standards, GAGAS. So I'm trying to highlight as I go. This is my first time going in through the new book. Highlight, done. Okay. So all audits in the federal government are accomplished by following the rules. So we're going to be going through what those auditing standards are, what the rules are, and so forth. And most of it you should already know. In this particular section, you will have some formulas, because part of auditing is your reporting on your annual statements. And there's a portion, I think you touched on it in the accounting, the last session, where if we talked about the balance sheet, remember there was a formula there for the balance sheet. So all of those financial statements have to be audited at some point. And so don't separate, because that was competency 2 and now we're in competency 3, then don't break the information up in your head. Understand is just compounding the information, and they all overlap one way or the other. So what you're auditing are those statements, the flow of funds, the treasury warrant, all those things that happen in module and the first competency 1 and 2 are now being audited in this process. So there are different types of audit. And so if I see something that's different from the older books, I'll point that out. But for the most part, everything looks the same. What are some different types of audit? Well, they audit our financial systems, because we got a lot of systems we deal with, correct? And there's always room for error. If a human being have to put the information in and process, or people want to conduct criminal activity, there could be some discrepancies. So there are financial audits. There's also the second one is performance audit. Performance is looking at the effectiveness of your processes that you have in place. Do they provide reasonable assurance that you are saving the government money, you are protecting the resources? So performance audit is the second, financial and performance. But there's a third type of audit called attestation engagement. Just a fancy term that says, if I'm a manager, I'm a commander, I'm a supervisor, and I want someone to come in and audit my accounting section, I told them what I want them to audit. That becomes an attestation engagement. Opinion as a result of examination is provided. The report as a result of an agreed upon procedure. So what does that mean? That means that an audit, typically we do not have control of what's being audited. When somebody hire comes into audit, we don't tell them what we want, what they're going to look at. They tell us, hey, we're coming and we're going to look at area A, B, and C. In the attestation engagement, the manager is allowed to request that the audit is done in a particular area. It could be you just arrive a new organization and you want to know what's our baseline, what is our current status. You do that by requesting an audit. Internal controls are what you do internally, but again, we can be biased in our own organization. So you want to have an external organization come in and review what you're doing. So any question thus far? So on the financial audit, which comes out of the Chief Financial Officers Act of 1990. I point that particular law out because it comes up in all 3 modules, 1, 2, and 3. The purpose of the 1990 Chief Financial Officers Act is to require that every agency have an auditable system. That was why GFIPS came about. I don't remember what year it was, but I was around then, and GFIPS came around for the Army so that anybody with the transaction numbers can look up what we put in the GFIPS system. So what I always tell people, you got to be careful, because once you enter something in the system, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be able to delete Once it's completed, you can't delete. You can trash can where it's still there. You could see it, but you cannot delete because that's an auditable financial system. Because of the CFO Act of 1990, which amended the Government Reform Act of 1994 and the Accountable for Tax Dollar Act that required executive agencies to prepare audit statements. So the 1990 Act was not the first time that we knew we had to have auditable system. That's what I got out of that. And so the guidance also provides that financial statement must have a rating. You must say the auditor concludes that this is an unmodified audit or a modified audit. So let's see what it says. An unmodified is when the auditor concludes that the financial statement are presented fairly in all aspects or respects in accordance with the applicable financial reporting regulation. And they are following the principles set forth by the Federal Accounting Standards Board, the FASAB. So that's an unmodified financial audit report. On the other hand, you can have a modified financial opinion on a financial audit. So the modified opinion can be qualified, adverse, or disclaimer of an opinion. I'm not sure if these terms were in the older book. It doesn't sound familiar, but if you see it in there, that's even better. But the modified, you have three options. Qualified opinion is an emphasis that's based on a subject matter expert. Adverse opinion, the auditor concludes based on the evidence, the financial statement as a whole are materially misstated, meaning something's wrong in your reporting. Let's see it. And a disclaimer of an opinion, auditor is unable to reach and conclude based on the evidence. So they couldn't give a result out of your audit. So three options. Then the performance audit, and it lists different types of performance audit. And I'm just going to throw some out there because I'm not going to focus on each one. Contracts, how you process your contract, how do you get bids, how do you select a contractor, your internal control processes, compliance to the laws and the policies and so forth. So all of those areas are conditions that are looked upon for the performance audit. Again, it's your day-to-day processes. How do you get the job done? Are you following the rules? And so that's just a list that's giving out. And then they go to the attestation engagement. Let me see if it says anything different than, while I pause, what is the GAO's regulation on auditing? What is it called?
Yellow book.
The Yellow Book. Oh, somebody's been studying. I was trying to make sure I didn't say it, right? So GAO, the stoplight scenario, red light is GAO. Red Book deals with appropriation. GAO Yellow Book deals with auditing, and GAO Green Book deals with internal control. So those are the three for the stoplight. So again, as you're studying, you always want to pause when you start getting into areas that you know you've already studied some information on it. Because again, the information overlap. You're trying to tell the story. So let's see, possible subjects. And then, yeah, so attestation engagement just says agreed upon auditing areas with the manager. All right, so let's see what the standards are they talking about. So government auditing standards overview, who is required to follow it? All government agencies that use federal funds. and get funds from the executive branch. That's me summarizing, because that's all it's really saying. All right, if you see anybody trying to get in, please accept them in, because I'm full screen, so I can't see. All right, let's see what else. GAO General Standards. Now, I think this was also in the other book. It just presented a little bit different in the newer books. So, auditor independence. As I mentioned, the auditor is an external organization, external agency or person that's coming in. Why do you want your auditor to be independent of your organization? What's the significance of that?
You can ensure that they don't have any bias towards or for your organization.
And that's the number one reason, right? Because if you have somebody that's auditing, and let's say you are their boss, their rater, well, they may not. If they see something wrong, they might try to fix it without even telling you. So you want an independence of mind. You also want an independence of appearance, because again, perception is 9 times out of 10, it's true. So the absence of a circumstance that will cause a reasonable and informed third party to conclude that the integrity, objectivity, and professional skepticism of the auditors had been compromised. We want to make sure we have someone that's going to come in that's going to be professional. It's not coming in when you audit. It's not meant to be got you. Let me see what I can find to get you. It's to help you to identify your blind spots, those areas that maybe you're not paying attention to, but they are significant enough to your operation that they can impact how you use your resources, and to ensure that you stay within the lines. So independence of mind, independence in appearance, and the professionalism. So you want auditor independence. You avoid self-interest, biases, which was discussed, familiarity. And I used to always wonder why these people, they don't work our area coming in to audit us. You don't want somebody, you want them with limits, with experience, but not necessarily having to know the ins and outs of your operation. So the threat that aspects of a relationship with management, such as a close relationship. So that's why familiarity, if I'm your close friend, I probably won't do an audit, because again, I might tend to be biased, favorable in trying to help you when you want someone to be blunt. Tell me what's wrong, what you find in my organization. Then you have auditor professional judgment. So I touched on that a little bit. You want a professional exercise reasonable care. They're not coming in just to say, got you. Now, again, when you hear that GAO is coming in, and I've seen them, they come in there dark. Everybody has on black suits. So they look like they look very professional, and everybody always get real tense. So is their job to come and find what we're doing wrong? I would say it probably is, because they work for Congress. And we need to ensure that we are following the rules all the time, the policies, the procedures that were established, the guidances, the laws, so that when you have those audit and when you deal directly with funding, we used to get the pop-up audits and checks where they don't tell us they're coming. They just show up, because when you deal with money, so you don't have time to hide anything. And so auditor professional judgment. Then I want to make sure that my auditors who are coming in to train, they may not have to know my job directly, but they should be competent in what they do. So when they give me advice as a manager, then I should feel comfortable. Hey, if we establish these particular standards and we follow them, we're going to be good to go. So the auditors are required, and this is also in the older study guides, are required to have 80 hours of continuing professional education, 80 CPEs every year, every 2 years. And a minimum, because even with the CDFM, you're going to have 2 years to do 80 hours, but you can't wait for year 2 to do 80 hours. You can't do it all in year 1. The requirement is a minimum of 20 hours must be done in any one of those years. So if you do 20 hours in the first year and you do the other 60 in the second year, or you can break them out. I think we're going to be doing a lot of virtual and online training the next few years. So at least 24 of the 80 hours must be directly related to auditing. So this was something that was different with the auditing versus other professional organizations. So they must have 80 CPEs every 2 years, a minimum of 20 hours in one of those years. And of the 80, 24 of them hours must be in government auditing. Then another standard, the GAO standards for auditing, is quality control. And so as you see, I'm going through the list, the competence, the independence, the quality control and assurance, and so forth. That means if you have a multiple choice exam, 9 times out of 10, it may be a matching scenario, or it may be a definition, and you have to pick. If they give you a scenario, they might say, is this quality control and assurance, auditor competence? So nope, just kind of read through, understand what separates one from the other. So when you get it in a multiple choice scenario, you know which one to pick. Because if I'm writing the exam, which I don't see the exam, but as a previous test writer, those are the kind of things we look. Whenever you have a list, you make a multiple choice, either matching, or you give a scenario that leads you to one of those. Any question thus far? So, because auditing is pretty straightforward. So the DODIG, as I mentioned, so Congress has the GAO. Well, the DOD, Department of Defense, is this a DOD exam? You might want to know what the DOD has. The DOD has the following responsibilities. We're going to go over the different organizations in a minute. They have to provide the guidance, the leadership, supervision, monitoring, and recommend policies for us to be more efficient and more effective in preventing fraud, waste, and abuse. So doesn't sound like anything new that you probably have not already heard. What you probably should know are the DOD audit agencies, the different agencies that fall under the Department of Defense. You have the DODIG, which we talked about. The Army has their own audit agency, Naval Audit Service, and the Air Force Audit Service. So that was 4, but I will tell you, having reviewed the CDFM multiple times, there's actually 5 agencies. Does anybody can tell me what the 5th one is? And I'm not, it's written somewhere in the study guides, but I can't tell you where in the older study guide. Because I think it deals with the Army. So you got the Army Audit Agency, but the Army has an audit agency just for contracts.
DCMA?
Contract Auditing Agency?
No, I said DC.
There's one that deals with contract. If I see it in here, I'm gonna let you know, but I know I read
Management Agency?
I'm gonna let you know the exact. I'm gonna run into it because I know it's in here because I saw one where it said contracting for audit services. But I know in the older ones, it's
I think I found it.
DC. Yeah, Yeah, what is it? Read it to me, because it's
Defense
DCAA, I
Contract
think.
Audit Agency.
Right, so the
D-
defense, and I think it says, read what it
D-
says, because it's the fifth,
DCAA, Defense Contract Audit Agency.
and then it said it could be considered the fifth, 'cause it says something to that extent. But it also says that that is also an audit agency. So even though the book directly states the DODIG, the Army Audit, Naval, and the Air Force, there's also a DCAA, Defense Contract Auditing Agency. So that kind of stuck out, because I didn't see it in the newer book. But just in case. So you'd be like, no, the book had 4. And then they're gonna be like, yeah, but if you read the other paragraphs. All right, let's see. Internal controls, we talked about contracting of audit services. So this was just, it's in the older books also, just pretty much saying that you can, the expertise of a contract, DOD can contract for non-federal auditors to perform audit services for the Department of Defense. So they don't have to use, of course, it's cheaper if you use one of our own agencies, but it's saying that they also, the Department of Defense also has the ability to get non-federal auditors, because don't our auditors have to be audited also? And I think, so let me go back, because I don't know if the new book said it, so let me go back on the competence. You have the older book in front of you, Mr. Lincoln?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Go back to auditor competence. And does it mention, because yeah, my brain is like
Audit
leading towards that,
competence.
something about them being audited themselves every 3 years? If you see it, yeah, let me know. But I don't see it in this area where I'm reviewing for the 2024 book. So we did that. But if I stumble on it, I'll let y'all know. So let's talk about an overall audit plan. So contracting for audit plan is flexible, adjusted, serve as notice. So you notify the agency that you're coming in to do an audit. I know when I worked on the finance side, when we did pay and DFAS was coming in to do audits, they typically will send us the checklist that they're using. So we'll know, okay, which SOP, which policy they're gonna need, and or different memorandums for records that we needed. We had the ability to tailor it to how they need it. All right, let's go into the phases of a governmental audit. What is the, before an audit occurs, what do you think, if you're in the organization or the agency, what should you be doing before you even know you're having an audit? What should you be doing? And hopefully I worded that question properly.
Prepping for it.
You're prepping. But again, in our day-to-day operation, should we not always be prepping for an audit? Again, that's why we're talking about efficiencies. So internal control, just keep that in mind, even though it doesn't directly state it in the book. Your internal control that you do in your organization is a precursor to an audit. And so if they say that there are 4 steps to an audit, understand that internal control comes first, then you have a plan, review, and report. Those are specific to the audit. Sometimes they throw you off when you only study the book and like it says plan, review, report, but you got to remember, what's the agency doing? They're doing internal controls in the meantime before an audit occurs. So audit planning. So in the planning, what are some of the things they're talking about? They got to define the perimeters, because you can't, when you do an audit, they're not going to have time to look at every single functions and process in your organization. So they're trying to come up with the standards, the objectives, the boundaries, the scope. So just kind of think of what are things you would do before you plan an audit. How are we going to do the audit? What's the methodology? Like I said, DFAS used to give us a checklist, and it shows exactly what they're going to be looking at and what they're going to need when they come. However, as my other example, when we dealt with money directly dispersing, we did not get notified there was going to be an audit. They just showed up, which meant prior to them coming, we had to make sure that we were consistently, even though they said nobody's perfect, but when you deal with the cash directly, that pecuniary liability is you got to be pretty much perfect in how you operate to the rules, to the standards of what is expected of you. In the review phase, which is the second phase of auditing, that's the time where you start gathering the evidence, the audit evidence. You're going through your checklist, your methodology, and you're gathering information. So the auditor will go where the information leads. So they may ask a question in one area, and because of your response, it will lead to another question, and so forth and so forth. So nothing hidden here. And then the final stage of the audit is the reporting phase. After the audit's been concluded and the evidence has been gathered, then the auditor will sit, go through the information, they will provide the evidence, and then they will give their opinion on the evidence and recommendation. So it's not just providing a report. So I would actually add recommendation after report, even though it's not in the book, but it's just making sense out of it. So the auditor has to do a statement of opinion based on the financial data. If an overall statement cannot be expressed, the reasons why must be stated. So there are different types of opinions that the auditor gives. And we're talking still again about performance audit. So it's unmodified, which is the best. And I think these were exactly the same as the older book. Modified, meaning there are some exceptions. A modified disclaimer, unable to render an opinion. And then they have a modified adverse, which is a material misstatement of fact that your failure to follow the auditing principles. And so there are 4 types of opinion when you deal with performance audits. Any question? So audit findings. So auditors often tend to use the word finding to identify the results of what they found, which is nothing new. And the elements of a finding are they give you the condition, the circumstances, what the criteria were, what is the impact, what's the effect, and then what was the cause of why money was wasted, because things were spent, but then the training didn't occur or something like that. So they break it down into those categories. Auditors, they will provide some potential benefits. Your benefits can either be monetary or non-monetary conditions. Monetary just simply means I can tie a dollar savings, a dollar amount, benefits that are expressed in financial terms versus non-monetary. It enhances our readiness. Well, I can't really put a dollar amount on it. Personnel safety, timeliness, maybe not necessarily a dollar amount, so that's a non-monetary benefit based on your operation and how you, on your processes that you have. They talk about the fryer. I think I saw that in the older book. Some of the auditors may perform, we touched on this, the non-audit services, and some examples that are listed: develop methods and approaches to apply to a new or proposed program. They help to forecast potential program outcomes and perform investigative work if they need to do so. So these are non-audit specific. So just look at different examples of non-audit services. They don't just do their formal job, they can do non-audit specific services also. Audit review of internal controls. And that's what we're doing. That's why I say the agency does internal control, GAO Green Book, and the auditors do a review of your internal controls. So internal controls serve as the first line of defense in safeguarding assets and preventing fraud, waste, and abuse. They touched on some emerging technologies. If you notice, a lot of, even probably in your work areas, there's always, technology is always tapped into to enhance and to be more efficient. So you have emerging technologies that help to reshape our financial reporting to make it more auditable and to take out that human factor as much as possible. So you have digital dashboards that are used. Let's see. Yep. And smart contracts. Smart contracts are built on blockchain, automate contract execution. So they're pretty much putting a lot of these into systems where you go away from the paper. Because I remember even before DTS came out, we used to walk around with the 1610 to get it signed and so forth. Then they went to automated using technology. We went to DTS as an automated way to process. All right, so it's a little bit more on technologies and they got some exercises. So I don't know, I think that's the end. Yep, and that is the end of the auditing portion in the 2024 book. Any question of anything we've covered in the next few sessions? In the previous sessions, rather.
I know you said there would be some formulas in this one potentially. Is there anything formulated in the 2024?
It's not for auditing, because what I was trying to do is kind of go back to last week, because it just mentions that you're auditing those statements. When you talked about auditing financial statements, don't forget the financial statements from last week when you had to calculate the balance sheet. Those are your financial systems.
Okay.
Any other questions? Miss Eunice, you know I have to call your name.
Yeah, I kind of joined a little bit
You coming later?
late. Yeah. But nothing yet. I do have some, but I'll get with you offline as I was going through what I've missed with the 2024. So, and I need a book because I have the old one, so I don't know.
Okay, a lot of the information is exactly the same. Maybe that's
Okay.
why I try to point out the little nuances. Because if I don't know if you noticed, but with management concept, you cannot buy the book
Right.
independent
Right.
without taking their class.
Mm.
And whether you pay, what is it, $1,000 or so for the training, or I think for these, the way I got these was I did the self-paced ones where they give you access for a year and you can download the books. Yeah, I just can't share it with y'all.
Oh, come on.
I'm being recorded. What are you talking about?
Okay.
All right, we'll talk offline. But anyway, this concludes our session for today on auditing. Next week, I'm going to start with the overall review and trying to tie everything back together again. Again, even though I break it down into individual parts and it's broken down into individual lessons in the book, when you take the exams, it's going to be 80 questions, all of it rolled up like a pot of soup. You put it all together. So you got to be able to decipher what are they talking about, because look at it as keywords. Everything has a keyword that makes them stand out. So when you see a scenario, once you can figure out what they're talking about, then that scenario in your head should drive you to understand, okay, what are we talking about? The budget process? Are we talking about accounting, finance, and so forth? So, all right, if there are no other questions, we're going to conclude for today. Again, if you have not already subscribed to our YouTube page, please, sir, please, ma'am, click that button and subscribe. Get our numbers up, leave a comment, click, just share it with others, because again, the more people that touch those videos and leave comments, then YouTube will start advertising. So as soon as you type CDFM in Google, you'll be like, oh, what's all this stuff here? There's videos out there. And then also click on the notification button at the top of your screen in the YouTube, because what it does, every time I upload a video, it's going to send you an email. If you have questions outside of, and maybe I didn't cover something, you can leave a comment. You can reach out to me independently, email me, whatever it is, and I'll try to clarify it for you. Again, this is Helen Thomas from the CDFM Study Group. I'll see you guys again next time. Thank you all for coming by.
All right, thank you.